Girl in UK or US by the age of 12, she's had her first case, right? And then probably if she has bad touch, then she can differentiate this is good touch, this is bad touch. In India, we don't have good touch at all. We only have either we're hearing news of bad touch or we have bad touch. So it's such a unidirectional understanding of I think bad aspects of sexual behavior, right? So sex is painful is the first reason why I think most women get vaginismus. Second is sex is shameful. Of course, we've grown up in a society where our school, our society, our family is so sex averse. Like our parents live together as if they're brothers and sisters.
Right.
We don't have a healthy view of sexuality or sexual behavior in our country, and due to this shame that we see aunties talking about girls who are wearing tight jeans or they are with boys, and this just sets a thought in the girl's mind that anything sexual is bad. If I have to get approval in my society or my school or my family, I have to be asexual. And this happened with me. I think a lot of approval was given to asexual tendencies. A girl who's just focused on studies and on achieving and on really getting into a good graduate college. The whole focus was on being
To look good.
a good girl.
Yes.
The good
Yes.
girl syndrome that has affected all of us as Indian girls. And good girl syndrome means asexual.
Right.
And how on earth, when you're asexual for 25, 27 years, when you've treated something as
Shameful,
very
dirty.
shameful and dirty, how on earth is your body going to just switch one night? You have marriage ceremony in just one day. How is your body going to switch? Your nervous system cannot switch like that. Yet till yesterday this was a no, and suddenly this is a yes. And the vidambana, that's the Hindi word. The whole irony of everything is that 25 years sex is bad, and the 26th year after marriage, 1 year after marriage, when you're 26, you're supposed to have your baby in the first year of your life. How is that ever going to happen? Your nervous system is so tuned to calling this negative, it doesn't become positive again. This is the second reason why we get vaginismus. And the third reason, of course, we've spoken about bad touch. The very first experience is so negative, it is so disgusting that your nervous system records it as a very, very, as a red flag incident in your life, right? And hence it takes a long time for your nervous system to switch to thinking of it as pleasurable as positive. This is the third reason. The fourth reason, of course, is ignorance. Very few of us talk about me as a doctor. I was a gynecologist, but how many of us have even looked at our own vulvas? We've done deliveries for other women, but we never looked at our own vulvas. Many people don't know there are 3 holes down there. It's all confusing. So when you've not even seen a place in your
Own body.
how are you going to use that place? How do you know how that place functions? So total ignorance, right? That's a place that's actually called a shame.
Yeah.
Right? I really feel so bad that we celebrate every milestone of our child. He came first, he got into 12th standard, he did this in arts and this in sports. But what about his sexual life? The moment your child has hit puberty, your child is a sexual being. Just as you record the milestones, when did he start to walk, when did he start to crawl, this is a milestone of your child.
Yes.
But you just close your eyes to that milestone and you just behave that, no, we don't know what happened. We only talk about periods. We don't talk about the change in her sexual perception.
Absolutely.
And she feels so alone. She feels so ignorant because we don't talk. We teach the child to cook food in 10th standard, but we don't teach the child about her own body.
Absolutely. I remember when I was a school counselor in one of the reputed schools, there was this incident where a teenage couple, they're 9th graders or 10th graders, they sneaked into the terrace and they shared their first kiss. And it's such a beautiful moment in a teenager's life. And I remember the entire hullabaloo that the whole school knew about it.
Yeah.
Such a horrible experience that that girl actually attempted to hurt herself.
Yeah.
Because the father literally took off his shoe and hit her saying, "You're a whore, you're a slut." And That is
Yeah.
the level of sex education that is not there. That is
Yeah.
the level of
Yeah.
ignorance that is there in our community, in our society.
Yeah.
Where some, and like, and then she was coming to me in the school, and again she would tell me that, ma'am, when I walk, everybody looks at me in such a dirty way, as I've done something wrong. I know I have made a mistake, but your limitations as a school therapist, you work in a school, you can't talk about these things,
Yes.
so all I could do is provide her comfort and be like,
Yes.
yes, these things
Yes.
happen, and you will get chance to explore this.
Yeah.
But now let's focus on your studies, or just focus on being
Yeah.
out of trouble. That's all that we could do. So Dr. Taru, thank you so much. You shared so much things about what are the causes, and what happens in the community. I want to understand what made you choose this subject. Why are you such a warrior in the field of vaginismus?
Yeah. I don't think I ever thought that I'm gonna really switch to working on vaginismus full time. But I think what made me do it was the fact that I had vaginismus.
Okay.
I had vaginismus for 7 long years, even though I was a gynecologist married to a psychiatrist. These are the very two professions that actually treat vaginismus, right? Yet we both got married while we were doing our MD. We were inside a medical college, so to say, the peak of medical knowledge, wherever in the community, and yet we were not able to have or seek wholesome care. For the first 3 years, I had so much shame about this that I didn't even speak about this to my own family, or I didn't even recognize or accept it myself that I have an issue, right? After 3 years, when it started to dawn on me that yes, I have vaginismus, I started to look around for help. I did find little bit of help in bits and pieces. Someone said, "Oh, it's your childhood trauma," or someone said, "Oh, it's just use your fingers to dilate." Someone said, "Use dilators." I was just so confused. I was just getting bits and pieces of information, and I was most importantly not getting that sustained motivation. Someone who would stand with me and support me throughout this journey. I was not able to do it myself because I grew up with almost a decade of child abuse. And yes, I forgot to mention that in as one of the reasons for vaginismus. A lot of women may not have any sexual trauma, but if they have grown up feeling extremely unprotected, uh, and they've grown up seeing domestic violence between parents, they themselves were bullied at school, or they were hit by their parents or grandparents, any kind of childhood trauma that made you feel very unsafe could forever put you in a state of fight, flight, and freeze, right? That
Absolutely.
these are like responses that animals use in jungles to protect themselves.
Yes.
So a child who's had a lot of childhood trauma, especially before the age of 7 or 8, can have really long-term consequences. One of the consequences, vaginismus. So I had that too, right? And so I wasn't able to just do these things myself. I just as if you have fever and you get admitted in the hospital, you get such beautiful caring in the hospital, or even if you're doing it through domiciliary care, you're doing it at home and then you're going and visit. For example, like in covid patients got so much of help. What about vaginismus? You just hand her these dilators and say, just go and do it at home. She is so scared of that. How are you expecting her to do that herself? And so 3 years later, after marriage, when I started healing myself, bits and pieces, a lot of avoidance happened because I didn't want to do it. It was like scary. It used to trigger me a lot. It took me 4 more years to actually get to a space where I quit my work. It came to a space where my marriage was really struggling because of vaginismus and because of my own deteriorating personality, that I simply had to quit work for a month. I read up stuff online from foreign textbooks. We didn't even have one single blog written from India in 2015. The very first blog in India was written in 2019. Imagine the amount of ignorance around vaginismus. And so I just did my own research, created sort of a protocol for myself. And guess what? I healed in just 3.5 weeks.
What are you saying? After 7 years of vaginismus?
21 days.
Amazing. I am literally getting goosebumps.
Yes.
That is so profound and
that
powerful.
day, I remember that day, I think I didn't celebrate. what I did was I cried. I cried so hard because it was so easy. And I was like angry. Why did I suffer for so long? For something that was so easy. And of course, it wasn't easy for me earlier, but now the first time I did it properly, it was so easy. And why did I have to suffer so much? It is not fair. We have so many protocols and treatment facilities available for every other medical condition. Why not for vaginismus? Why did I and my partner suffer so much? And we didn't deserve it, right? Vaginismus was not of my making. I always tell my clients, you
not
didn't
your
create
fault.
vaginismus in your body. You were born 100% perfect. This vaginismus is a result of the environment, right? Just as we have a hardware and a software in the computer, they are all fine, but one day you have a virus, it doesn't work, right? Similarly, the hardware of your vagina is perfectly fine. Your software of getting aroused is perfectly there. What's not working is you have a virus of pain and shame in the system, and you were not born with it. So, vaginismus is not your fault, and not getting treatment for so many years is not your fault, right? So, I started understanding that women with vaginismus are suffering not just because of vaginismus, but also because they don't get empathetic, sustained supportive care from our medical system. And I and my husband, Dr. Dhara, we started thinking about how we can contribute to this field. How can we give back the knowledge that we had gained from very painfully gained from our own experience, right? And that's how in 2020, we started working on vaginismus full time.
That's amazing. That is such a huge and wonderful story. I mean, this is something coming from your personal battle. I mean, you overcame that challenge and you didn't want the rest of the people to suffer the way you did. And you wanted to. I remember in your podcast, Dr. Taru has a wonderful podcast in that she mentions that when she was struggling with vaginismus for 7 years, one thought that you had was, show me one girl, one other lady who has the same thing, because there was so much mystery, shame, and repression about this subject that nobody wants to talk about it.
Yes.
So that is just amazing. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for sharing your story, and thank you so much for creating this protocol. I think you're doing it with Proactive for Her.
Yes.
So
Yes.
can you tell us more about this program that you have created?
Yes, for sure. So it always is said, right? When you truly want something with all your heart, universe conspires to make it happen. So when COVID started, that's when my husband started to say, everyone is at home. This is a good time to start a support group on vaginismus. So we kind of just said it out on Facebook and social media that we're starting a support group. I didn't really think even one woman would come because I had never seen another woman with vaginismus. Guess what? There were some 7 women who came, and we were a part of a support group for 2 months. And I shared my story, I shared the way I healed. It was not a very structured way because we were just doing it for the first time. And guess what? I think out of those 7, 5 of them healed fully.
Wow.
And this was without much, systematic effort to do it. It was just once a week support group. And that's when I thought, oh my God, this is working. Why don't I use this in a proper way? That's when Proactive for Her came along. So Proactive for Her was just starting out at that time in Bangalore, and they were starting their first large telehealth portal for just women, right? We didn't have judgment-free spaces for women. Any unmarried woman would go for help, right? Usually the first question that is asked is, are you married? How are you coming for a sexual issue then? There would be judgment for women. So this was one of the first judgment-free spaces that we had in our country. And so they actually were very bold to kind of request for a collaboration on this. They said that they would really like to host this topic. And frankly speaking, I didn't have the courage to do this on my own. I had the ideas, but I don't think I had the the admin work and then the large scale projection of this work. I didn't have the capacity to do that. So I think my experience and my skills and their admin support and their ability to project this to a larger audience, we came together, and Achita Jacob, who's our CEO, she actually was very passionate about women's sexual health and especially this condition. So we launched our first properly structured program in which I thought of everything, every component that must be there, which I didn't have because I did this very, in a very isolated way. So I thought of support groups because my thing was I want to see another woman with vaginismus. If I had seen that, my shame around this condition would have decreased, and the number of years I took to heal would have decreased because a lot of avoidance was because I felt very inadequate about this, right? So my first thing was I need women to see other women. So that's how support groups came into the picture. We had support groups and we had individual sessions. That's how it all started. But as we progressed, we started taking feedback of women. We started thinking about making it more and more trauma informed and wholesome because we realized three things, in fact, that without the partner's involvement, the final healing can really struggle because ultimately you have to do it with the partner. And we also have to realize that in this story of vaginismus, this guy has suffered equally as much as this girl. It's not just the girl who has suffered, but he gets lost in the picture. There's no one to understand his feelings. There's nobody to help him ventilate or to help him understand why is she doing it or is she doing it purposely, right? So that's when partner support groups came into the picture. My husband, obviously, who was the brain behind this idea, this whole idea of the support group, I kind of helped him, kind of invited him to do a partner support group with us, and he started doing a separate support group for just the partners of these women. Then we started realizing that it's not just about painless intercourse, it's about pleasure. It's not just doing it for the sake of giving it to the guy. It's actually about reclaiming a part of you that was taken away from this culture, by this culture at a very young age. It's a part of reclaiming your sexual self. And hence, pleasure should be the ultimate goal and not just painlessness. So we brought in Aprupa Vatsalya, who is a Instagram influencer. And ever since, she's transformed the pleasure aspect of our program, and she's taken people from just painlessness to pleasure. So this was the second component that started. The third component was also to realize that with vaginismus comes a lot of stiffness in the body because women are taught to sit in a particular way. They're taught to cross legs. They're taught to just be more subdued in their environments. So all of this contributes to being sexually subdued. So we needed a session in which women just open their bodies up, and so we got Priya Prabhakaran, who is our yoga coach, our pelvic floor and yoga coach. So she takes sessions to help people just open their bodies up and do these asanas specially designed for them. And vaginismus comes with a lot of anxiety, so anxiety release meditations. So she brought the body work into the program. Right. So that's how few components got added into this program. And talking about the trauma-informed approach, right? So I didn't even know what trauma-informed meant by the time we started this program. So we realized that vaginismus is trauma, right? It's a trauma consequence. It's a consequence of a woman who's experienced trauma in her childhood. And trauma is not just physical trauma, right? It's also emotional injury. And a girl being convinced that sex is painful, sex bleeds, it
or
hurts,
sex is bad,
or bad touch. These are all traumatic influences that these little girls have had. So it was very important for everyone in our program to have a trauma-informed approach.
Absolutely. Like when my clients come as a trauma-informed therapist myself, one of the first things I teach them is trauma is not a checklist. It's actually a spectrum. On one end of the spectrum are the big three traumas, being raped or, being physically violated or, hurt, witnessing something horrible like an accident or natural disaster. But there is this little t trauma, which is very, very subtle. But if it's chronic, then it can be just as impactful, but worse than acute trauma because it happens once and you get that support. If you get into an accident, you will get that kind of support. But every day, if you're listening to you're bullied, oh, you're dark, or you are ugly, or you're fat, or just something, listening to something that is very demeaning or hurtful, that builds on.
Yes.
So a lot of people are surprised to understand that they actually, because people will be coming to me and telling me that no, I have never experienced any kind of trauma. But when I ask them, how
Yeah.
was your childhood,
Yeah.
so they'll be like, oh, my grandmother used to always berate my mother.
Yeah.
And when I tell them that, that is actually a kind of trauma, it's a kind of CPTSD, they are just in shock.
Yeah.
And when you say that, that makes so much sense, because most of our illnesses is psychosomatic. A lot of our illnesses is psychosomatic. So what happens to our mind, it shows on our body. Like eczema and all of these things are also stress related.
True.
So of course, vaginismus is going to be a mental thing. Makes so much sense.
Let's realize that trauma is not just about some events happening. It's also about some events not happening.
Right.
So bad touch is traumatic, but no sex education is also traumatic.
And the lack of good touch is also traumatic. You never see your parents, being vulnerable in front of each other, showering each other. They're not being a couple. They're living as a roommate. Or even roommates that hate each other. And then you have never seen a healthy role model for couples, romantic relationships. So that also.
And it's not about events. A lot of times we downplay events. So what's the big deal? We also had bad touch. So it's not about the event. It's about the experience inside the recipient.
Absolutely.
That determines trauma. What was the experience? What was the impact?
There's this very beautiful phrase which says trauma is not what happened to you. It's what happened inside of you when that event happened.
In the absence of an empathetic witness. Right? If you did not have a witness who was able to empathetically hold space for you while you were discharging your painful emotions, that leads to the start of trauma. So vaginismus is trauma, right? And hence, if we don't see that as trauma, then we are somewhere doing a disservice to the patient. So being trauma-informed simply means realizing that certain incidents can have long-term impact, or certain behaviors of the patient can be a result or can actually be a trauma response. For example, it could be very easy to get upset with a client who's been guided to do some exercises for vaginismus, but 2 weeks later, she's still not started it. It's very easy for us to judge her. But when you have the trauma lens, instead of judging her, you would realize this is a trauma response. Avoidance of that painful memory of whatever happened in her childhood, or avoidance of pain, is also a trauma response.
Or maybe the confidence is so shattered by that point that they don't even want to try.
Very true. So this trauma lens has really helped all of us be more compassionate, hold space for our patients in a better way.
So Dr. Taru, what can we expect in your program for vaginismus?
So like I said, we have a 2-month program and it's completely online, because we realized that you don't really... So obviously it would have been better if we had an in-person program, but it's very difficult, to have people from different parts of the country travel and come to you. So we started this program back during COVID. So the online setup really helped us. So we continue the online setup, and we have some in-person dilation support in the Bangalore clinic. But for some patients who need extra support, but the online setup works very well for us. It also helps to ensure a lot of privacy and confidentiality. She doesn't have to let anyone know that she has vaginismus. She can do it in the secrecy of her room. She doesn't have to take leaves. She can do her regular work and then just do our program alongside. So it gives a lot of extra leeway to the patient to kind of do this with her regular life going. Now, our program has basically been designed on the 4-step process of healing. And these 4 steps basically are universally used steps across the world. It's just that we have created a flow chart of that 4 steps. Instead of just randomly doing those things, those components, we kind of have arranged them in a stepwise fashion, that first you do this, then you do this, then you do this, and then you do this. So we start the first step in the week 1 of the program. And the first step is actually about really sitting with ourselves, getting to know our bodies. How does my body look? How does my vulva look? What is the anatomy like of the body? What is the pelvic floor? How do I understand that during vaginismus, my pelvic floor or the sheet of muscles around the vagina is tighter because of contraction and holding the trauma over time? So how do we learn to relax that? And this is the physical part of the work, right? The mental part of the work is emotional healing, where we really sit with the client and really unpack the past. We really try to isolate what were the reasons why she got vaginismus in the first place. And we actually take every memory one by one and we start to heal that. We use a lot of my colleagues who are psychologists and psychiatrists, they are EMDR trained. So that really helps us in really processing the past traumatic memories. So we really sit with emotional trauma initially, and we don't even touch dilators by day 9 or 10 of the program. And in the second week, we start vaginal training with the help of fingers and vaginal dilators. So vaginal training, like you can see, the word itself means training. The vagina has been now trained to contract over the years. So now we will train the vagina to do something opposite. You know that muscles of our body can be trained, like you can build your muscle, right? So similarly, this muscle has been trained to contract, we train it to relax. We do it with the help of either fingers or dilators. Usually dilators better because they can also be retained inside for a longer time, but we also use fingers. So these are like artificial little penises. You're scared of the penis, right? So we don't do that initially. We literally start working with a little 1 centimeter little dilator, which looks like the penis, and we go up to a size of 3.6 centimeter diameter with the length of around 5 to 5.5 inches. And as she starts to tolerate the first one going inside, then the second, then the third, and that's vaginal training, in which she trains her mind to relax in the presence of something at the vaginal opening, and she learns to relax her pelvic floor in the presence of something at the vaginal opening. As she tolerates the first, then we go up the sizes. The hallmark of this vaginal training is zero pain.
Wow.
That's where they're scared about, right? They're scared about pain, right? And we don't make them experience pain.
Absolutely.
So there are some protocols in place which ensure that you do this whole process painlessly. We give them a pain scale of 0 to 10, and we tell them if at any time your discomfort crosses 2, you stop. You're never going to make yourself just push through the pain, because that's the thing that people say, right? What's the big deal? Everyone has pain on the first night, right? You get accustomed to it. You don't. In fact, what is cycle of pain? Cycle of pain means if you once experience pain, your body is going to throw a protective response. It's going to make your vagina contract even more. So pain actually leads to more pain, and that gets into a vicious cycle where one day you just say, I don't want to do it. So we break that cycle of pain and convert it into a cycle of confidence by making it a painless process.
That's amazing. So what is the age group of the participants that have come to you?
Right. So obviously, we don't have any strict rules of married and unmarried, because I think that's too judgmental. Anyone who wants to come is fine. So I think the youngest that we have had is like 21 years, 21, 22 years. And of course, we ensure for them, is there enough support at home? Do they have enough community support, friend support? Are they willing to take responsibility of themselves, and then we start helping them throughout this process. We've had single women in the program as well, right? Women who had issues in their past relationships, but now want to really heal this before they get into the next relationship. We've had women who got divorced because of vaginismus, and they want to empower themselves now. We've had women who've had babies by IVF, but they still haven't healed vaginismus. Because sometimes we think, hey, this is not happening, let me at least have a baby. So then they go ahead with that. We've had couples who've had 14 years of relationship, 14 years of vaginismus, and they have also come to us. Wow. So we've also had polyamorous couples in the program, where a woman had a female partner and a male partner. So we've had clients from across the spectrum.
That's amazing.
Right? And that has actually helped us grow as well, right?
And how old was your oldest client?
Maybe 44 or 45.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yes. And we are very happy that we are receiving the trust of people, because we've now healed 212 women.
Wow. From
across the world. And because we also accept international patients, we have people from Canada and US and Australia and everywhere, and they participate in the program. And these are mostly Indian women. These are Indian women. And let's realize that the treatment facilities for vaginismus are very less, not just in India, but even across the world. yes, we do have outside, but they're extremely costly. Sometimes it's just prohibitive. You just can't go there. In India, most of the vaginismus treatment is done by sexologists, few psychiatrists and psychologists, and they are done inside clinics in the OPD setup. So many clients don't even know where to go, right? They would usually go to a gynecologist, and that's the first place we go to, whether when we have a vagina related issue. But being a gynec myself, I know that we are not trained in sexual health. Most of the training was in childbirth, infertility, contraception, or periods. We did not have any training in sexual health. Hence, even though if we know what vaginismus is, we don't know how to diagnose it, we don't know how to treat it, right? A lot of women who came to us were actually very disappointed by gynecological examinations, because that's what happens, right? You go there and then fingers are put inside. That's the very thing about which she's scared, and then we make her go through that, right? So it's a very painful process for the woman to have a vaginal examination for diagnosis of vaginismus.
And scary as well.
Yes. So simple use of terms like I really wanted to do it, but the moment it started, I suddenly didn't want to do it. I felt scared. My thighs stiffened. My vagina just closed down. There was a wall. There was pain. These are enough. This is enough evidence for vaginismus, right? A vaginal examination should not be forced on these women. Of course, there is something called as Lemont grading, which tells us the severity of vaginismus from grade 1 to grade 6. So a gentle vaginal examination with just one finger should be able to tell us which severity of vaginismus it is. There is definitely no reason to push through, because it's going to worsen the cycle of pain, right? So sometimes gynecological examinations can be tough for these women. So it has to be very sensitive, very compassionate, not forceful. And Lemont grading also has a grading that says the woman just did not allow vaginal examination. She just retreated on the bed. That is Lemont grading 4 or 5. You just document that on the paper. You don't have to force fingers inside and re-traumatize her,
Wow.
right? So, compassionate, gentle diagnosis, knowing the right keywords is important. Ruling out some physical reasons is important, and a very trauma-informed approach for vaginismus. Like we said, we have this 4-step process. Second stage, I said, was vaginal training. Third stage is involving the partner, because without his involvement, we cannot get through to the last step, and that involves some amount of harmony development, some amount of understanding each other. We have steps like sensate focus, helping the partner to dilate, right? And the last step is, of course, vaginal penetration. So we take them through this 4-step process. And like I said, we are right now due to start the 22nd batch tomorrow. Wow. And 212 women have healed. So very, very happy about that. And very, very happy that Proactive for Her has been such a solid support for this.
That's amazing. Hey guys, so thank you so much for listening to today's video. And if you learned something or you want to share this, do like, share and subscribe to our channel. And comment about any questions that you probably have for Dr. Taru. And see you soon for the next podcast. Hugs and healing. Bye.